Breakfast is served. Aisha danced across the kitchen with a carton of milk in her hand. It won't be served if you spill that milk all over the floor, her brother Malcolm said. Aisha grinned. Malcolm shook his head and smiled back. Aisha and Malcolm didn't get to hang out as much as they used to, now that he was in college studying to be an industrial engineer. But today, their dad had to work at his restaurant, and he was leaving Malcolm to look after Aisha and her cousin Tanya. When Malcolm first went to college, Aisha had no idea what an engineer did, but now she knew that engineers are people who use their creativity and knowledge of math and science to design things, systems, or processes that solve problems. Aisha was very proud of her brother. Aisha's dad walked into the kitchen. "So, how are my two favorite children going to spend their Sunday in Boston?" he asked. Aisha planted her hands on her hips. "Tanya and I have big plans for you today, Malcolm." Malcolm raised his eyebrow. "Oh, really?" Aisha nodded. "You can take Tanya and me to work with you." Malcolm had gotten a summer job at a nearby factory, a potato chip factory. Aisha had been begging Malcolm for weeks to take her to work with him. "We'll go to the potato chip factory," Aisha continued, "and I'll make up my own flavor, and then they'll name it after me, and then I'll be famous, and then—" "There she goes again," Dad said. "Whoa there, kiddo," said Malcolm. "In case you've forgotten, today is Sunday. The potato chip factory is closed. That's why I'm lucky enough to be your babysitter, remember? Besides, I told you we could go only if you and Tanya had completed your summer projects." "Oh, yeah," Aisha sighed. It was almost the end of summer, and Aisha and Tanya were supposed to have projects to show on their first day of school. The projects had to be about something they learned over their vacation. Aisha couldn't understand why she had to do any schoolwork at all in the summer. "Maybe you and Tanya can come up with your project in the morning, and then we can go do something in the afternoon," Malcolm said. Dad gathered his uniform and his work bag from the table. "Now that you have a plan, I'm off to the restaurant to create my latest masterpiece, the Daily Special. I'll see you all for lunch." When Tanya arrived, the girls sat in the dining room, trying to think of something that they'd learned or done over the summer that would make a good project. Malcolm sat down at the other end of the table, spreading out his drawings. "Since you two are finally getting down to business, I thought I'd do some work of my own," he said. Tanya peered over his shoulder. "I thought you worked at the potato chip factory. What do these drawings have to do with making chips? Or eating them?" Aisha said. "You do get to eat the potato chips, don't you?" "Sometimes," said Malcolm, "but mostly I help the factory improve the systems that their workers use. I try to make their work easier, or faster, or safer. That's what industrial engineering is all about." "What do you mean?" Tanya asked. "I'll give you an example. See my textbooks?" He pointed to the pile of thick books. "Pretend they're a crate of potatoes. Try pushing them across the table." Aisha pushed on the books and slid them from one end of the table to the other. "Wow, they're pretty heavy." Malcolm reached into his book bag and pulled out a bunch of pencils. He lined them up on the table and pushed the pile of books on top. "Try pushing them now." "Hey, that's a lot easier," Aisha exclaimed. "The pencils act like little wheels. They help make work easier by reducing friction," Malcolm explained. "Making work easier?" Tanya said. "Last year in school we studied things that help make work easier. Simple machines, things like levers and wheels and axles, right?" "Exactly," said Malcolm. "We use lots of simple machines at the factory. All the big machines are made up of smaller parts, called subsystems. A lot of the time, those subsystems are made up of simple machines. The simple machines help the workers get more done because each job is easier, and the workers are less likely to get hurt, too." "That's what we can do our project on," Aisha cried. "We can show how simple machines make the work at your factory easier." "Now you're thinking," Malcolm said. With that project, it looks like you'll finally get your wish to go check out those chips." "We'll go sometime this week." The girls cheered. "But," he added, I think there's a lot of cool stuff you can learn about simple machines before we head to the factory. Aisha frowned. Like what? Simple machines aren't just used in factory subsystems. They make work easier all over. Let's go on a scavenger hunt. If you show me some simple machines that you spot today, I'll show you how I use them at the factory. Deal? Deal, the girl shouted. I think I know a good place to start, said Malcolm. Let's go visit my friend Sean at the movie theater. I bet he'll have lots of simple machines to show us. As Aisha reached for the door on the coat closet, she called out, Hey, I found one. She pointed to the door handle. A lever. You're right, said Malcolm. And inside the handle, where you can't see, there's another simple machine, a wheel and axle. See, you haven't even left the house yet, and you're already well on your way. Aisha, Tanya, and Malcolm stepped into the theater where Sean worked. Hi, Sean called as he walked into the empty lobby to greet them. The matinee didn't start for a few hours. It's so neat that you get to hang out here, Sean, said Aisha. The building is so beautiful. Yeah, it is, Sean said, but I do more than just hang out here. I help set up the stage for some of the performances. If I worked here, all I'd want to do is dance, Aisha said. She twirled around to demonstrate. She and Tanya started to leap and skip around the lobby. Come on, Twinkle Toes, Sean called. Let me show you the rest of the theater. He led them down the side aisle, onto the stage, and into the wings. The huge wooden floor gleamed under the lights. Aisha imagined herself dancing across the stage in front of hundreds, no thousands of people in the audience. Let me show you how we change scenes during a performance. Sean walked over to the control panel full of buttons. He pressed one, and without a sound, an outdoor scene with trees, plants, and a park bench floated down from the ceiling. Wow, it's like magic, Aisha exclaimed. Sean pointed to the machinery hanging from the ceiling. It's actually just a bunch of pulleys, wheels with ropes that run around them. Pulleys? Shouted Aisha and Tanya. Malcolm gave them the thumbs-up sign. Am I missing something here? Sean asked. Tanya explained the simple machine scavenger hunt to Sean. I see, said Sean. Well, we use pulleys all of the time around here to change the direction of forces. I pull down on one end of the rope, and, thanks to the pulley, the other end of the rope pulls the scenery up. Imagine how much harder it would be for the stage crew to get all the scenery into place without the help from the pulleys, Malcolm said. The simple machines behind the magic, said Aisha. Exactly, said Malcolm. You girls are naturals at this game. Keep it up, and you could be engineers. Engineers who dance, Aisha said, leaping across the stage. Joining in, Tanya improvised a few steps. They imagined themselves in beautiful costumes, fans showering them with thunderous applause. Now that you girls have danced up a storm, you must be getting hungry, Malcolm said. Let's go see what Dad's cooking up for lunch. On the way to lunch, Malcolm, Aisha, and Tanya walked through the Boston Common toward the State House. Aisha looked up at the stone monument towering high above her. The writing on the monument said it was dedicated to Colonel Robert Shaw and the 54th Regiment of the Union Army. They were the first all-black volunteer regiment to fight in the Civil War. She began a marching dance to remember them. This is one of my favorite neighborhoods, said Tanya. The houses and apartments are so old, I can imagine horse-drawn carriages on the streets. The cars around here now are a lot fancier than carriages, said Aisha. She paused for a few moments, and then said, You know what? Maybe they're not that different after all. Cars and carriages both work because of their wheels and axles. That's a great observation, said Malcolm. Once you start spotting simple machines, you can start to see how complicated systems, like cars, are just arrangements and combinations of simple machines. Aisha's not the only one who can spot simple machines, exclaimed Tanya. Check out that flagpole on the schoolhouse. There's a pulley on it. Aisha looked up at the American flag flapping in the warm summer breeze. Tanya was right. There was a pulley helping to mark an important Boston site, the Abel Smith School and the Museum of Afro-American History. The Smith School was the first public school for African Americans in the whole country. Come on, girls, said Malcolm. I bet Dad has lunch on the table. I'm sure he'll want to hear about the progress you've made on your project. Aisha and Tanya took off running towards Dad's restaurant with Malcolm close behind. Delicious smells greeted Malcolm and the girls as they walked into the restaurant. They were careful to avoid the cooks and the other workers in the kitchen as they made their way to the small prep area in the back where Dad was waiting for them. I hope you're hungry, Dad said. I've started cooking lunch and I could use your help. Malcolm took out dishes and utensils while Tanya and Aisha told Dad about the simple machines they'd seen so far. Dad picked up a knife and began cutting dough to make rolls. Dad, Malcolm said, winking. Nice technology you have there. Is that a wedge you're using? That's exactly what it is, said Dad. Did you girls know that a wedge is a simple machine that helps push things apart? The thin edge of the knife concentrates the force I put on it to push the dough apart. Malcolm, I know the knife is a simple machine, but what did you mean when you said it was technology, Aisha said. It's not even electric or anything. Technology is more than just electronic gadgets, said Malcolm. Technology is anything or process that people design to solve a problem. Oh, said Tanya. So that knife, that wedge, helps you solve the problem of cutting stuff? Yeah, said Dad. The knife makes my life as a chef much easier. Why don't you grab a few different wedges and help me finish our lunch? Tanya, you can make some lemonade, and Aisha, you can cut up some cookies. Tanya picked up the juicer that was sitting on the counter. It was the old-fashioned kind with a cone sticking out of a cup to catch the lemon juice. So this is a wedge too, she said. This pointy part pushes into the lemon to squeeze out the juice. Aisha, how are you doing on those cookies? Dad asked. This cookie cutter is another helpful wedge, she said. It helps me cut perfect star shapes. Malcolm put the cookies in the oven to bake, and Dad put sugar in the lemonade Tanya had squeezed. While Dad finished grilling the chicken, Tanya and Aisha looked around the rest of the kitchen. They found gears in an old-fashioned egg beater, levers and a screw in a wine bottle opener, and all kinds of wedges for cutting. Finally, lunch was ready. Now that you two have been using both your brains and your hands, I bet you've worked up quite an appetite, Dad said. You better eat up, said Malcolm. I have one more special stop planned for us this afternoon. After lunch, Malcolm led the girls to the Museum of Science. As soon as she stepped inside, Aisha's eyes lit up. What is that? Asked Aisha, pointing to the machine in front of her. The machine inside a plastic case had lots of metal parts that were moving some small balls around. I bet we can find some simple machines in there, Tanya said. This is like a Rube Goldberg machine, Malcolm explained. Usually, when someone designs a machine, they try to make a complex process simple, using as few steps as possible. The goal of a Rube Goldberg machine is just the opposite. Machines like this are designed to make simple processes complicated, using as many steps as possible. It's more fun this way. Look at how many cool steps it takes to move the little balls around, said Tanya. She watched the ball move from the bottom of the machine to the top, taking a ride on a corkscrew. I see a lever and wheels and axles too, Aisha said. We've barely gone inside the museum, and we've already found all kinds of simple machines. I bet we can find more, she said, pulling Malcolm's hand. As they walked up to a huge model of a Tyrannosaurus Rex, Tanya pointed out the sharp, pointy wedges that he had for teeth. I wonder if dinosaurs could dance, Aisha giggled. I think the Tyrannosaurus Rex would dance like this. She puffed out her chest and rocked back and forth with big, lumbering steps as Tanya and Malcolm laughed. They moved on to the baby chick incubator, where several chicks were all about to hatch. So, Aisha, you were inspired by the dinosaur, said Malcolm. Do the little chicks give you dance fever too? Actually, they're awesome, exclaimed Aisha. The chicks hatching would make a great modern dance. First, I would start like an egg, she said, crouching down in a little ball. And then I would use my beak like a wedge to help me break out of the shell, she continued. She flapped her arms and ran in a small circle. Tanya and Malcolm laughed at the sight of Aisha making scratching and pecking motions. She did look like a little chick. Bravo! Exclaimed Malcolm. Why don't we dance our way over to the exhibit I want to see? When they entered the Science in the Park exhibit, Aisha and Tanya saw children playing on merry-go-rounds and racing toy cars down inclined planes. Malcolm led them to the seesaw. Hey, Aisha said, that seesaw is a simple machine, isn't it? You're absolutely right, said Malcolm. But which simple machine is it? How do you think it works? That's easy, said Tanya. It's a lever. A board or a bar? Don't forget the fulcrum, said Aisha, pointing to the support under the bar. That's what lets the seesaw swing back and forth. She stretched both of her arms out and swayed like the seesaw. Hey, Malcolm, said Tanya. I bet Aisha and I can lift you up on the seesaw. All right, let's see what you can do, Malcolm said. He climbed onto one end of the seesaw, and both girls climbed onto the other. Malcolm's end of the board rose and carried him up. That was too easy, Malcolm said. I've got another puzzle for you. Can just one of you lift me up? Everyone got off of the seesaw. Aisha and Tanya looked at Malcolm, then the seesaw, then each other. Said Tanya. I bet I can do it. She climbed on the seesaw close to the pivot point. Now you get on, she told Malcolm. He sat on the other end. His weight pushed Tanya way up in the air. Whoa, Tanya said. I guess I was wrong about what would happen when I moved towards the fulcrum. Well, there's an important clue in that mistake, Malcolm said. Now that you've seen what happens, do you have any new ideas? I do, exclaimed Aisha. If Malcolm moves to the middle and Tanya moves back to the end, I bet it will be a lot easier to lift him. Sure enough, Tanya's weight raised Malcolm high in the air. You've got it, see? Changing the distance between the fulcrum and the weight changes the force you need to lift it. Okay, you can let me down now, Malcolm said. But Tanya only giggled and stayed in place. Come on, Tanya. Nope, she teased. Well, if you don't let me down, then we can't leave, and if we don't leave, then I can't take you to the potato chip factory, cried Aisha. Tanya quickly slid off the seesaw, and the three of them made their way back home. The next day, Aisha and Tanya skipped into the potato chip factory ahead of Malcolm. His boss, Miss Johnson, was there to meet them. Hello, girls, Mrs. Johnson said. We're excited to have you here. Malcolm told me you know a lot about simple machines we use in our factory subsystems. We found simple machines everywhere we went yesterday, said Aisha. I really want to see how they work here in the factory. I know it will help us with our summer project for school. Miss Johnson and Malcolm led the girls to a big truck. This is the beginning of the whole process, she said. There are about 50,000 pounds of potatoes here. 50,000 pounds, cried Tanya. That's a lot of chips. The girls watched a worker drive a tractor up to the back of a truck, picking up a load of potatoes and dump them onto a conveyor belt. The conveyor belt didn't look like the ones at the supermarket checkout. There were lots of little bumps on it that bounced the potatoes around. Look, Aisha said. The conveyor belt uses wheels and axles to bounce all of the dirt off the potatoes. That's right. Next we clean them even more, Mrs. Johnson explained. The potatoes go into a big vat of water where we wash them. On the other side of the vat, a big screw called an auger pulls the potatoes out again. At the Museum of Science, we saw a screw lifting things too, said Tanya. The group walked on. I see another simple machine, cried Aisha. She pointed towards the machine that peeled the potatoes. All of the potatoes slide down an inclined plane. So the potatoes all come down gently, said Tanya. That's right, said Mrs. Johnson. We don't want mashed potatoes. We do want them sliced, though. She pointed to a round machine. The potatoes are spun against really sharp blades. And those blades are wedges, Aisha interrupted. Right. After the potatoes are sliced, they fall onto a conveyor belt. Then they're ready to cook in hot oil, said Mrs. Johnson. The girls watched the potato slices fall into a huge kettle of oil. Malcolm pointed towards the metal rods that were stirring the kettle. That mixing machine stirs the slices so a person doesn't have to stand over a hot oil doing that job. I bet an industrial engineer figured that out. Making work easier, Aisha said. After the potato chips cook for about 5 minutes, we add the seasoning, said Malcolm. Like vinegar and herbs and barbecue and pepper, said Aisha. Not all at once, please, Malcolm joked. Then the chips are packaged and sent all over the country, said Mrs. Johnson. But we do keep some bags for ourselves. How would you like some fresh potato chips? You don't have to ask me twice, said Aisha. Lead the way. At home that afternoon, Tanya and Aisha talked about how to present their project in class. We could write about it, said Tanya, but I'd rather just take everybody in our class to the factory. What if we could bring the factory to our class, Aisha asked. We could design our own subsystem just like they have at the factory and show it to our class. That's a great idea, said Tanya. We could pretend a truck drops off the potatoes on the floor. If you have to keep reaching down to the floor so you can cook them, that will hurt your back. We can design a simple machine subsystem to lift the potatoes up. Let's get Malcolm to help us, said Aisha. The girls ran to find Malcolm and tell him their idea. Malcolm helped the girls gather wooden dowels, tubes, and long sheets of cardboard. Okay, now what? Tanya asked. But Aisha had already started pulling materials out of the box and putting things together. Just dive in and start building stuff, she cried. Malcolm interrupted. Aisha, that's one way to get things done, but engineers usually make a plan first. It can be really helpful. But how am I supposed to know what to plan? Asked Aisha. I figure things out as I go along. Sometimes engineers do that, explained Malcolm, but we have steps to help us too, to be sure that we know what materials we'll need and how they'll fit together. It's all part of the engineering design process. What's that? Asked Tanya. It's a way of doing things, step by step, said Malcolm. You're already asking some good questions to get yourself started. Next, you need to imagine some solutions and then plan it out. You may even want to draw out your plan. Aisha frowned. I can definitely imagine lots of things, but planning is no fun. Come on, Aisha, Tanya said. We'll do it together. Aisha and Tanya sat down on the floor and began sketching. They questioned and compromised and built on each other's ideas until they had a plan that they thought would work. I think we're ready to go, Tanya told Malcolm. Let's take a look at your plan, Malcolm said. The girls explained their drawing to Malcolm. Malcolm nodded. Looks like you're ready for the next step, creating your subsystem. All three of them began working to bring their plan to life, testing each part along the way. I think we're done, said Tanya as she taped a pulley to the edge of the counter. How will this work? Asked Malcolm. I was thinking it would work kind of like a seesaw we used in the museum, said Tanya. The potatoes would go on one end, and then some weight on the other end will push the seesaw down. Then the potatoes were rolled down the ramp onto the counter. Said Malcolm. Let's give it a try. Aisha pushed down on one end of the seesaw. The three of them watched as a few roly-poly potatoes teetered off the side of the ramp. Oh no, Aisha cried. Since there aren't any sides on this inclined plane, the potatoes fall off. That's no good. Malcolm looked at the girls. It looks like it's time for the last step of the engineering design process, improve. Do you think another simple machine might do the job better? Well, said Tanya, we could use an inclined plane like the one we saw at the factory. Maybe that would be better. And we could even make a cart with the wheels and axles to carry the potatoes up the inclined plane, Aisha added. The girls and Malcolm worked on their inclined plane and cart until they were satisfied with the whole system. Well, look at that, said Malcolm. You girls really are engineers. I can't wait to show everyone at school all the stuff we learned this summer, said Aisha. The girls began to giggle as they danced their way over to Malcolm to give him a big hug.